April. But Phinius encouraged me to put it on. So we're trying to move. Quick show of hands. Who's been to an AGM before? A mid AGM. Okay. So you guys know what I'm talking about. So we're trying to not do the stuff on the left. We're trying to do the things on the right. That is the introduction. Welcome. So the first order of business is the approval of the previous minutes of the AGM, of the previous AGM. They were published on the website along with the notice of this AGM. And the question here is, are there any issues with or alterations to that, or are we happy to note them as approved? None. Okay. So we'll note them as approved. Trader, did you raise your hand?
No, it was actually, I didn't know whether you were.
Okay. Matters arising from last year's AGM. The only two which I managed to get when I trawled through the minutes was a safe space, which I'll speak to later in the chairman's report. And then there was also a specific request for increased transparency from the board, which I hope you will see coming through in this year's meeting. Okay, so if there's nothing else there, we will go into the chairman's report. It's awfully quiet there. Okay, another show of hands. Who's managed to read the chairman's report? It was about a 2-page PDF. Okay. So I'm taking out a couple sort of highlights that I want to speak to in terms of what I feel we may have accomplished this year. The first one was this term of sort of internal workings or foundations. And I would say my feeling now, as we enter this AGM, we do have a largely cohesive board with strong trusting relationships between board members, which is greatly improved. And I must confess, is not without Masque on my own part, because it was a rocky start to the year, as some previous directors will attest to. In terms of membership, I think my feeling, my sense has been that we started to regain your trust in terms of trust in the board, and we are making a continuous effort to improve getting feedback, transparency, etc., which goes hand in hand with communications. In terms of the technology, data management, which it was quite funny when I came in here, the state some things were in, but it's just natural in an organization that's over 20 years old. So we've migrated to Microsoft, we're using proper technology, we're protecting data, etc. And we're going to make a greater effort to. One of the things that I laughed when I found out was that we weren't actually storing members' email addresses as captured on the membership forms. We were only using the ones that the city gave us, which explained why many people said, "Hey, I never got told about this meeting. Why, we never hear what the MID does." So I think when we did a manual capture exercise, we got 130 new members' email addresses. So if you're not getting communication from us, reach out. And then the last thing when I talk about internal workings of the organization is staff. And to my knowledge, we've actually done the first proper set of performance reviews with the mid staff, which is maybe a bit of a corporate term, but it's really a fair sit down with people to say what is expected of you and do you have what you need to complete your job. And you'll see that comes through in some of the budgets in terms of proposed spend on some training. So yeah, that's the first. The second thing was clear communication networks, and there are a couple of things we've done here. There's a WhatsApp group. Seems that everyone prefers WhatsApp to almost anything else these days. If you haven't seen it, you're welcome to join, but the idea is that the board isn't the sort of dark room of people coming up with plans. Yes, there's a responsibility that sits on directors, but it's a community organization, and therefore we should be, and we are open to input. And so we've established that as one channel through which to get feedback and ideas from members. We've done various things internally in terms of having portfolio-specific communication channels, which helps. You'll see that even though there may be, at the moment, there's 6 directors, there's often many people who contribute in specific portfolios, and it's worth having portfolio-specific communication channels. There's a general service requests WhatsApp group, so if you have questions, Jackie monitors that, and you're welcome and encouraged to use it. And the last thing, which is what I wish I had when I joined, was a bit of an organizational handbook, because you get a lot of turnover of directors in organizations like this, and we figured it would be nice to have a bit of an A to Z when you join as a director. This is a concept which yeah, I do mention here, John Cartwright. I don't know if anyone here knows John. I'm sure many of you do. I drove all the way to Greyton to get some input from him. It was this idea of separation of the board and management of the company, right? And this is something that we've been starting to implement, and we will continue to drive that. It's not exhaustive, but generally speaking, the board should be responsible for governance, direction, relationships, strategy, policy, etc. Right? And a burnt-out board makes them more susceptible to the natural and necessary criticism, which they would attract. Right? And John's view was that this is largely what's driven a constant sort of fractious history of the mid. And that you have a lot of well-meaning people working hard to do a good job, and on the other side you've got members who are paying and expect delivery of services in a professional manner, and that's understandable. And I think from that is where a lot of frustration and sort of issues can creep in. On the other side, the management are responsible for the implementation of strategy and policies. So their job is to operate the company. It's not the board's job to operate the company. What I've said is that if the plans we put forward require significant volunteer effort, they aren't feasible. So an implementation plan that requires people to work for nothing to get it done, it's not feasible. And we hold management accountable. And the idea is if you're paying someone, well, then you can hold them accountable to do their job. Okay. So, and this was from a survey that I did. I don't know if anyone would like to hazard a guess. I will welcome audience participation at this point. How many directors has the MID had over the last 22 years?
50?
Yeah, okay, so I think it's about 60. So 60 different people have tried their hand at this. And it's part of why I'm actually sort of in consultation with the board, trying to look at things differently. Because if 60 people have struggled to get it to a sweet spot, I'm not sure the 61st person is necessarily, without changing something significant, going to make a massive difference. These were just some of the reasons that we only got 23 responses that were cited in terms of reasons for stepping off the board. So lack of capacity, issues with other directors, challenges with the members' attitudes towards him, frustration with the city of Cape Town, and then there was also a long list of other frustrations. And then the other question I asked was, did you feel more like a manager than a director? Of which almost half said yes. And I think if I dig into the others, there were more. So effectively, you had a bunch of people that were volunteers wanting to do a good thing because they love Muizenberg. It's hard not to love Muizenberg. But, you know, getting very burnt out, trying to do things in their own ability and not sort of respecting that divide between implementation and strategy, which I'm proposing should be more distinct. Okay, the fourth thing that I want to pull out of the chairman's report is just some projects that I'm personally quite excited about. I see a couple of FOMP members here. FOMP is Friends of the Muizenberg Park. I see Karen is there. And this is something that is going to be long and slow. It won't be as fast as we would like it to be, but I do believe we're moving in the right direction. There's great potential in terms of the park, how we can use the bowling greens, effectively using that space better. It's a greening project, which the greening portfolio is sort of kicking off because historically there's been very little budget towards greening and sort of urban landscape, along with that urban art, which I think you guys would notice some part of what makes Muizenberg have its distinct feel. The urban planning committee is, I guess, it's probably a favorite of mine, which is where we looking sort of 10 to 20 years time, what are the moving parts within Muizenberg? What are those things which could make a real difference to sustaining the character of Muizenberg from a planning perspective? There's a skate park, not on Surface Circle, don't worry, Tessa and Peter, which we've got dreams for. And then under Jesse's direction, there's a view to establish our own public safety control room. Okay, so the last thing then is the vision. What is the vision? In my mind, for the company itself, it's to be professional and sustainable. It should have a board which is representative of the community and primarily concerned with serving the community. I think there's a massive opportunity in front of us, as I guess there's always been, in terms of what Muizenberg has to offer as a place. And I think that's the improvement district model is a potentially very effective one at looking after a specific area. In terms of Muizenberg, I mean, somebody said to me the other day, I think in it's one place in America, that the logo was "Keep it weird," right? But so part of me thinks with Muizenberg, we just want to keep it the way it is, right? In many regards, I don't want the bird garage to go away. But yeah, you know, conserve what we've got in terms of a great location, make it safer, more accessible, and then there's something which ties up with the urban planning, which is Jesse actually came up with this, was the idea of sort of reimagine Muizenberg. And I don't think as a board we're in a position to come up with a vision for Muizenberg. That actually needs to be something that the community, that we get, you know, in consultation with the community. But I think there's a great opportunity there. All right. That's the end of the chairman's report. I don't think are there any questions? No. Okay, we'll keep going. So Can you get the microphone for the gentleman? Press and hold.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Vincent. I've seen your last thing on the board here to make Muizenberg safer. I'm here 20 years and I think Muizenberg is down. I've been waiting for cameras in front of my house for like 20 years and nothing has happened. We you spoke even about it. And still nothing. That was about 6 or 8 months ago. And I think if we all can't have cameras, then nobody should have a camera. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, I say. Other you got, oh, take money out, but for me they're not working. They're just using my money.
Cool. Jesse is going to speak to public safety shortly, but that is noted. Thank you, Vincent. Okay, the next item on the agenda is feedback from operations. And I'm going to ask Jesse and Phinius to present on public safety and social development respectively. But just before that, I want to take you through a bit of a self-assessment that we've done. So you've probably already read what's already on the slide there. So the idea is, how do we know if we're doing a good job, right? Sentiment is not I don't think necessarily the best measure, because you know, somebody told me if you're doing a good job, no one will come to the AGM because it's like everyone's doing something fun, right? And they've got nothing to complain about. So what do? We took the implementation plan, which contains about 62 odd specific actions that the organization is responsible for, and we just went through it. We said, are we doing it? Are we not doing it? Are we kind of doing it, right? Like a robot, red, amber, green. And from this, this assessment is part of why I think I'm confident that things are moving in the right direction, but it also informs what we're planning going forward, right? Just some of the stuff that's off track, and the so what of that previous slide is, or the section is, we're under no illusions, right? I'm not sitting here saying everything's sweet, right? I don't think it is. But these are some of the things that I think that are in the implementation plan, and I think there would be great impact if we actually did the things that were in here, right? So, for example, Amended Business Networking Forum. We know that part of what makes Muizenberg awesome is small businesses, and there should be more attention paid to this, right? I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is just to give you an idea of what has come up in our own self-assessment. And these slides will be available afterwards. I'd also be happy to share the comprehensive list with you. These are just some of the things which, quite frankly, we look at it and say, hey, we're not doing this as well as we should be. Deep cleaning roads weekly, right? It's become a thing that I need to like switch off my head, because if I'm walking down for a surf and I see weeds, I have to just remind myself to take it easy, because you have to live life, right? If you're a director, otherwise it's just all encompassing. You're working 7 days a week. But these are things that what we've tried to do in development of the strategy is to, instead of applying first order thinking, which is there's a weed, call somebody and give them an ear warming, right? Second order thinking says, okay, well, how did it get to this state in the first place? What is the system that should be in place in order to get the weeds gone? Which I know is simple, but if you look at the whole list, you can see that there's moving parts. So the so what of this, in summary, the first line there shows in Q1 earlier this year, when we did the self-assessment, what the state was. We had 11 off track, 32 with concerns, and 17 on track. And just before the AGM now, I repeated the exercise, and we have 18 more that are we feel on track. 11 less that have concerns and 8 less that are off track. So it's not perfect. In theory, it should be fully green, right? Because we should only do what we commit to do. And if there are things that are non-essential, then we'll find a way of identifying that which isn't absolutely essential. But the goal is to be realistic with our commitments and then to have a business which is designed to see those commitments through. So, yeah, this probably, I'll let you just squeeze over that for a second. But yeah, I don't think the performance of the company is where it should be. With conclusions, we believe that it's structural in that it's no new set of directors doing the same thing is going to make a difference. Public safety, as an example, when we requested proposals from providers earlier this year, it was clear that we're probably paying below what we should be in terms of the quotes that came in, right? Which begs the question, should we be paying more? I would say we'd probably expect to pay like the mean. And then other SIDs that are of a comparative size of the mid don't have staff, right? Some of them purely use service providers, which is it's an approach we could take. But the reality is, if you have staff, there is also management of the staff that's required. That's natural. And I think that's part of, if you've got 6 volunteer directors, sometimes more, right? I sympathize with Michael, because imagine being a person with 6 bosses, none of whom are dedicated to it, right? And they all think that you're the only person that is there to get their job done. It must be frustrating. So that dynamic of a volunteer board with people that could maybe do with more support in terms of management is a factor. So that's overall company performance. And I'm now going to hand over to Jesse. If you want to come up, Jesse, just to speak about public safety in particular.
Sit down as well.
You're welcome to sit there.
Cool. Good evening, guys. I think I'm going to stand a little closer because my eyes aren't that great. Good evening. I am Jesse Adonis. I have been co-opted onto the board towards the end of July, if I'm correct, end of June, beginning of July, and that was on my request. We experienced a couple of spikes of home invasions and some robberies in the Muizenberg area, and I thought it was about time that a young man, somebody with a bit of intelligence, looked at the problem of safety in Muizenberg and potentially look at solving some of these problems. So I'm going to walk you through what it looks like. There's 3 parts to what we're going to look at now. The first part is just the initial and the term-to-date analysis of what's been happening in public safety. I've sort of broken it down into what I think the portfolio looks like of experience now. And this is really just the first couple of months of engaging on the ground, meeting with the service providers, sitting with Michael, doing a lot of the day-to-day operations and getting a clear understanding of what the improvement district safety looks like. The first part, Simon, could you zoom out a little bit? I think this is on context. The first part I looked at was the external environment. So in Muizenberg, we are sandwiched between many other areas. The majority of the areas are very similar in social economic development, things like Lakeside, Marine Estate, Cork Bay. It's more or less the same type of people, us in the room, taxpayers that are living close by to us. Our biggest trouble area is Breakpoint, and what I did initially was just look at a timeline on Google Maps. What does Breakpoint look like over the last 10, 15 years? How has it grown? How is it impacting us? And so that's looking at the external environment and looking at potentially what could be the problem over the next 10 years going into the future. And we saw Breakpoint growing massively. I think it's 3x growth. 3x? Yeah, 3 times the growth in the last 10 years. And so crime is not proportional to 3 times the growth, but it is probably the biggest area of concern for us. Initially, when I started, we had camera network. Now, we heard some questions around the camera network, or valid questions. The My initial assessment of the camera network is that there was not an individual owning the space. Nobody really knew how many cameras were offline, how many cameras we had, and where they were positioned, why they were network. We went around and we found about 60-odd% of the network, almost 68% of the network was down. 24 hours a day, nobody was looking at anything. And that's a problem for obvious reasons. Some of them were poorly placed, meaning the positioning of the camera itself doesn't lend to good optics, the connection was poor, and our service provider couldn't really do the job that we were asking them to do. Some of the cameras were outdated in technology, so really poor optical zoom, the internet connection was shit. We really couldn't make out what we wanted to see in terms of, can we see in the dark? Can we track an individual from one road of the village to the next road? Those are the kinds of things I initially encountered with the camera network, and some operational concerns, things like getting into a residential site. So who do we contact? If somebody's camera is up on a GWC building, what is the point of contact? How long do we wait for them to get back to us? Can we ask for a key, etc., etc.? So there was a couple of operational gaps that were missing in the camera network. Where we are at the moment, currently, over the last 6 months, I'd say, is we have a network that is 98% of the time online. That means the entire network is basically viewable at all times. We've done a couple of upgrades, a part of a larger CCTV project upgrade that we've been doing. These are replacing old technology, replacing cameras that are outdated, putting a maintenance schedule in place for our service provider, and that is a quarterly maintenance plan. I'm gonna answer your question in a second. I do have some words to say about that. But yeah, so we put a quarterly place in line for a maintenance schedule. We've upgraded a large part of the CCTV network. 60% of the network is upgraded. We've placed some really cool tech. I'm happy to speak to that in more detail with anybody else after this. What we're going to see in the future in terms of the camera network is a mid-control room. So once we have determined the exact placing, the correct placing of cameras across the improvement district, we want to be able to view that with our control. And that means an obvious thing to do there would be to build a control room, something that is housed within a mid-office, something that we have access to 24/7, that is not sitting on the premises of another service provider. That gives us a couple of things, leeways in terms of how a neighborhood watch would interact with that, how the public would interact with that, and how we'd be able to pull data and reporting on our CCTV network. Service provider. So initially, I found a mountain that was engaged and willing to take direction from us. However, I did find that contractually we were a bit light. When I joined, we had a month-to-month rolling contract with our service provider. That obviously opens up a bit of exposure for us. It's the business lack of confidence in the controllers, who are essentially lower scale workers that are being paid to do the job on a bicycle with a pepper spray and a baton potentially. These are obvious concerns for anybody employing a private service provider. Some of the other things we found were a lesser refined or not a working service level agreement, meaning we weren't really holding them to task on a day-to-day basis based on the types of incidents that they experience. So things like robberies, house break-ins, car theft rings, etc., etc. These were all our initial analysis of the space. And what we found was that the service level agreement wasn't really matching the context or the day-to-day operations of Mountain Red. And then lastly, our powers of authority as the MID was slightly limited contractually, meaning we didn't have the ability to simply change on demand a controller, whether we suspected them of anything, or call for, run a criminal check or an updated database of their drug usage or whatever the case was. We were just slightly limited contractually in our powers as the music improvement district. Where we are at currently is we've got season coming up, and we didn't want to drop a service provider in the front of season and have a new service provider coming at the beginning of the season. So we put them on a fixed term 6-month contract with, I believe, a 8% escalation of the fee, which is reasonable under the circumstance. We've also provided them with additional operational support, things like bicycles, pepper sprays, torches, things that they need on a day-to-day basis to do the job. And we are using this as an opportunity to build a stronger service level agreement. So generally, your contract has a service level agreement in it. We've made an addendum and put a whole bunch of, I'm happy to share this with anybody that gets clearance to see it, but we put a whole bunch of new points into the SLA. Things like the ability to penalize a service provider for underscoring or underperforming. And then also on the opposite side is the ability to reward them for overperforming, which we haven't been seeing a lot of, but that's okay. I think we're going to manage it on a day-to-day basis. What we would like to see in the future is, like Simon mentioned, we might be underpaying for our service provider. So part of my initial rollout was a procurement process, and that was to find, just go to market and see what are other SIDs paying for the service provider. Are we asking the right questions? Are we missing anything in terms of the service level agreements? And what we found was we generally underpaying about 15 to 18% on our service provider compared to other SIDs with a similar capacity. So a similar mix between property of commercial and residential and a zoning specific concern. Where we'd like to be in terms of a service provider is one that is responsive, one that is kept to task in terms of our contract, and one that is not dropping the ball every second week. I'm going to run through the rest of it. Public participation and education. So this is a super important one. Without an engaged ratepayers association, we kind of are. We have a couple of directors in the Muizenberg Improvement District. We have a lot of people paying rates and taxes, and we are then in turn pay our service providers. The problem with public participation and safety is that they kind of go hand in hand, right? Without an engaged public, we won't have the ability to effectively keep the community safe. Initially, I found an ineffective comm structure, and this is not to anybody who's in the room at the moment, but we have several communication structures, whether it be WhatsApp or email or radio, whatever the case is. In Muizenberg, they are very loose and they're not managed effectively. We have a defunct neighborhood watch, meaning we don't have a neighborhood watch at all. Right? They've ceased to exist, and that has left a massive element in the hours of the night, which is the most important to Muizenberg. And then we have a bit of a reactive behavior cycle from the general public. And that is either to go and storm the Mountain office and tell them how shit of a job they've been doing, or it is to lambast, to shout at or degrade public service providers in public, which is I understand it comes from a place of frustration, but it's a super unhealthy practice. So how do we change that behavior? We have currently initiated a Muizenberg Community Watch, which has been very responsive, very successful in signing up new patrols. It is busy changing behavior and also changing the communication structure in Muizenberg towards our service providers. So what we're doing is as the neighborhood watch is now set up and there's patrols and there's a working committee, we're slowly moving our private service providers off of the general WhatsApp groups that you're all on, and those are public WhatsApp groups, onto a monitored, dedicated WhatsApp group where the service provider and all of the sector's service providers are on, whether you're a private client or Mountain or not, we'll be able to get service there. What we'd like to see is a continued healthy neighborhood watch that's grows. In terms of stakeholder relationships, so when we think of the Muizenberg Improvement District, right, we're in the middle of a large area and there are lots of working parts, things like the City of Cape Town, PUMEC, the Mountain Rangers, a few service providers from a public safety perspective. We've got security cluster mandate, which is SAPS, law enforcement, and other bunch of security bodies. And what we were finding was that they were not necessarily communicating with each other. So SAPS would be doing their own thing, law enforcement would be doing their own thing, Mountain men would be doing their own thing, and our beach manager would be doing their own thing. And what we've successfully been able to create is a communication structure that puts everybody into the same room, on the same radio line, and on the same WhatsApp line. That means everybody can see what we are doing, so we're holding each other accountable across the board, but more importantly, ahead of season, we are able to have an effective plan for SAPS and season opening. And I'd like to see that continue. In terms of the bulk environment and the hotspots, this is probably the most important part of the initial analysis. And this was looking at what areas within Muizenberg, like on a curb level, are giving us the biggest headaches. So what parts of Muizenberg, whether it's the train line, what part of the train line, whether it's the Checkers backyard and the private road in Checkers, whether it's the Mountain, whether it's any other public space or private space that is housing both the homeless drug problems, the criminality in Muizenberg, and or is acting as a fencing hotspot for robberies and thievery. We initially found that there were several, and a lot of them sit within our relationships with SAPS and with PRASA and with private landowners. So what we've been doing currently is we've identified all of the hotspots, so that is working with Mountain Men, working with PRASA, working with SAPS and Ali to identify what are the top 10 hotspots in our area and how do we address that. So building a plan for season, we've included PRASA in assisting us with clearing much of the railway line, with a lot of the fencing is happening, stolen goods is being stored, a lot of the homeless nights, sleeping overnight, and crimes against each other in certain scenarios. And so the built environments and the hotspots in Muizenberg is something that we pay a day-to-day focus on, something that we meet with our service provider twice a week on, and we generally discuss and monitor our hotspots on a daily basis. I'm very excited to say that a part of the built environment and the service provider concerns are going to be alleviated with the signing of a dedicated law enforcement officer. And this will be doing a few things for us, right? We get a dedicated law enforcement officer, I think in January or February, 1st of Jan. We've managed to negotiate a very good price for them. We brought them down by about 120,000 Rand. And basically what this means is we will have a dedicated Muizenberg Improvement District law enforcement officer on our payroll. That'll give our service provider the ability to enforce the bylaw and make arrests. That will support social development in their work, in identifying who are truly homeless and who are bad actors within the community. And that will also go a long way in supporting the neighborhood watch in their nightly or daily duties. I think that's a massive win for us, and it will help us not just in the 6 months from Jan onwards, but the year thereafter. So it's about a 1.5-year contract that we have the law enforcement officer for. Is probably one of the parts of the portfolio I'm most excited about. And then lastly, when we think of partnerships, I've mentioned this just briefly, but some of our limited partnerships is working with the likes of Matthew at Spire. Claudia's been kind enough to help facilitate that relationship. Other private landlords, PRASA, SAPS, Ali, not just in our normal season planning, but also in a sort of a monthly cluster meeting to allow all the sectors, bodies, security bodies, whether that be government security bodies or private security bodies, to meet alongside the CPF, discuss the problems, roll their sleeves up and start attacking or addressing some of the concerns in our sector. I think that's it for me. Any questions besides the Frankfurt question?
In terms of
Just
crime,
get the microphone.
in terms of mixed crime numbers, is most of the crime committed by?
Hello.
Is most of the crime committed by people who are homeless, who live around the streets of Muizenberg, or is most of the crime coming from outside?
Yeah, that's a good question. Your question is most of the crime coming from the homeless within Muizenberg or crime from outside? So generally crime from outside, and that happens in two ways. One, it happens when gang wars erupt on our borders and people are fleeing those gang wars, so they come into our area. They're generally quite violent criminals. I would say that's the majority of our daytime crime. The majority of our nighttime crime is the stealing of cars, and these are hijacking rings or car theft rings. We've been able to nab about 7 of them over the last couple of months. Without a neighborhood watch, we would have done that much quicker, right? So now that the neighborhood watch is up, we'll probably have a lot more eyes on the streets. But yeah, most of the crime is coming from outside Muizenberg.
I don't think I need the mic. I think people can hear me. Sure. First of all, I've been involved with security because I live right virtually on the park. And that is where all the criminals come to relax and have a little something to drink after they've performed all their mischief. And it's a very difficult hotspot. I have to say, of all the service providers we have had in all the time I've been working for Muizenberg and living in Muizenberg, the Mountain Men have given me the most prompt service. They have come, they have sorted out things, but our law enforcement, which we pay our ratepayers money to, the ones on the beach, we never ever see them. I only see them lying around, talking to taxi drivers, laughing and talking and having a very nice time. So I'm very pleased that you are getting this paid security law enforcement that can enforce the bylaws and help mountain them. So please do not forget about the park, because that is the recreation area and the area for relaxation for the criminal, you know, to get away from all of you.
Yeah.
So it is very much a hot spot, remains a hot spot. And I've had a terrible 3 weeks trying to stop land invasion on new places on the park. You know, we all walk past and we all look very, very relieved that Muizenberg's fine and it hasn't turned into a Halfway or Masque situation. But that is all due to my constant work, and I'm getting tired of it. I can't be getting people now from Cape Town who are far more cheeky and more strong and use far more dirty language to me, and the mountain men, you know, because they are just bringing big, big mattresses and moving in. And it's a big concern, because there are many wonderful plans for Muizenberg, as Simon has mentioned. Great things to improve our area and to make our area a viable place to come in. And don't forget, that's our entrance. And this has been a different kind of person who wants to do the land invasion, very cheeky and far more determined. So I just want to say thank you for all of this that you are doing, but not to forget about that.
Thank you. We won't forget about the park. We've actually just included it in the SY.
For the Brody. First of all, thank you for a really excellent report, lots of information. I just wanted to check with you, if you could just, I don't know if you can, because I know this relates into this year, but if you could just talk to the approved budget for last year, for this year, and the actual expenditure. So the approved budget was 1.76 million, and the actual expenditure that I can see was for 1.47, for 1.3 million. So it's actually an underspend of 400,000. If you can speak to what happened to that money and why it was an underspend. But my real question is, great that you're getting a law enforcement officer. That was actually a suggestion I made when I was one of the 60 directors in 2019, because that is what enables the arrests, etc. But I think the crucial issue, and if you can speak to this, and maybe Phinius can speak to this as well, is what the relationship is going to be going forward between social development and public safety. Taking Kara's point, if people are invading in the park, and social development is being kind to people and facilitating and looking out for people's social welfare, how is that going to impact on your capacity in public safety? And a real concern is, why is it that we have to wait for a law enforcement officer to put together a detailed database of homeless? What have our social development service providers been doing for the last 2 years if we don't have that? And maybe can this continue that issue as well?
So again, I'll address that questions before anyone else has their question. So I definitely cannot speak on the difference in expenditure just based on my term. I think Karen would be happy and Simon would be happy to speak to that, if I'm correct.
Can we pick that up as an action?
Well, what I will say in terms of the relationship between social development and public safety is, so from my understanding, we don't really have the teeth to enforce the bylaw. So that was the reason for getting the law enforcement officer. In terms of mapping out and getting a database of the actual homeless and those affected by homelessness in Muizenberg, I'll leave Phinius to answer that question. Safety and public safety and security comes of primary importance with it. So in terms of enforcing the bylaws and making sure that people won't sleep on streets and acting in devious ways, that is primarily our concern. What that looks like on a policy level, we have yet to get some of the final details out. Sorry, Chair's just giving me some time notifications there. And then I just want to talk to the Frankfurt situation. What was your actual question?
I see you giving up in the people there. You turn that. And it's not a nice place for the people to come to because people talk about massive this, massive that. And my friends say, right, yes, go. And it's dark and ballistic all the time, how the people are there. You think it's people that man. You got the bowling green, which is half empty. Who did you come to there, man? Only logic. And I see what other things. One more.
Cool. Can we stick to questions, please?
Let the council do their work and take our money and we concentrate on security. And we don't clean the ground. We have much more.
Last one, and then we need to move.
There wasn't a question about all of that is acknowledged.
Public partnerships, it says limited to working relationships with private landlords. Is the MID open to having a partnership with a homeowner?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was just the initial term, the initial analysis for the term today. So since I've been here up until now, which is July until now, what I found was that we had limited working partnerships with private landlords past. So always open to
Absolutely.
always open to that.
Okay, Jesse, we've got one more question from a lawyer left, and then we need to keep moving because I'm aware of time.
Maybe not a question, but a comment on partnerships. I think maybe what you can add is the body corporates, because we have, cameras, and that we would probably, look at how do we integrate the system, because I think that also takes a bit of pressure from from you guys doing it yourselves. So I think that's really a huge. There's a lot of body corporates with cameras, the cinema, and I know some colleagues from the cinema here. So, I think it would be quite a welcome network. But I think well done. I think just the last comment is that yes, don't be, we shouldn't be thinking that this will be achieved in a year. I think you guys need probably another 2 to 3 years to start getting this going. But well done. I think this is amazing. I haven't seen this in the last 10 years I've been using it. So well done.
Hello everyone. My name is Phinius. I was kind of thrown into the deep end of social involvement by Richard Bolland, and I had to learn how to swim, which I think I can swim by now. But like Simon said, we're not going to stand here and say, hey, we've been doing a great job. I think from the social development side, the work that we've been doing is very complex, it's very difficult, and yeah, it hasn't been easy. But we have managed to pull some strings and try to work with people in the community. And I think what I want everybody to understand is from the social development side of things, we're not just dealing with homeless people. Specifically with the NGOs that we work with victims of gender-based violence, we work with victims of human trafficking, we work with street children, we work with people who are at the risk of becoming homeless, we work with people who are poor. So a lot of times people look at homelessness as the big elephant in Muizenberg. But there are reasons why people become homeless, and those are some of the factors. And from the research that that U10 and other big organizations have made, came up with, is that it takes about 1 to 3 years to get somebody off the street, one person. So holistically, to get somebody off the street, it takes time. Why? Because we live in one of the most unequal society in the world, a traumatized nation, and drug addiction is a very big issue. Thank you, sir. Drug addiction is a very big issue. We live next to a very poor community that is separated by the road. And when that community is bleeding, everything bleeds into this community. I appreciate that question that you asked, if homeless people are the people who are causing crime in Muizenberg. The reality is homeless people are being used by gangsters to do things that they don't want to do. So there's something called forced begging, or some of the homeless people are even being used as spotters. because who protects homeless people at night? It's not the security companies, it's not subs, it's not law enforcement. Guess who protects them? It's gangsters. And unfortunately, a lot of them get exploited in the midst of all of that. So part of my work is not just getting people off the street, it's also dealing with crime. That's why me and Jesse, we have to have a sense of chemistry when it comes to the work that we're doing. Because if we don't do that, we'll never separate the seeds from the weeds. That's what I call it. Because there are homeless people, but there are also people who are exploiting homeless people on the street, and those are gangsters. And who are those? Where do those gangsters come from? Our neighborhood, Capricorn, Overcome, they call them the funkies. So, and I want to say, I don't know who's managing the Mountain Man. I want to say, Auntie, I really appreciate that company because they've been very helpful in the approach when it comes to dealing with homeless people. Because we need to understand that some of the homeless people in our community have mental health problems. And the last thing that you want to do, the last thing that you want to do when you're dealing with homeless people is on a person with mental health problems. So what we're trying to do is have a balanced approach where the social worker works together with law enforcement in order to help somebody that is sitting on the street. Because the bylaw says refer, and if people refuse help, then the bylaw, the fining, moving the road can be applied. So that's kind of like our holistic approach when it comes to dealing with homeless people, is that this is a social issue that does not just need security companies or law enforcement. We need social workers. And that's why the conversation with the mayor or with the councillor is that we need more social workers in our communities because we're dealing with traumatized people who have addiction issues. And like I said, there's no 2-minute noodles or microwave around this issue because it's also systemic. Because we all know our history, and it's not an easy one, and it's not a comfortable one. So we're not just addressing people down here, we're also addressing systems that created the need that we're dealing with. We're not just addressing the seed, we're also addressing the soil. And this is an up and down relationship that we need to have with the city, with the people on the ground, with this community, with homeless people. And what we're trying to find is how can these two people or two communities work together? That's why New Hope has come up with this thing where the housed and the unhoused neighbors meet every Tuesday at 6. And you get to sit with homeless people at the table and you eat with them and you have a conversation, because once you understand the person, it's very easy to address their needs. It's very easy to see them as another human being, not just as a bum on the side of the road. So what we're trying to do is how can we build relationships with this community, with homeless people, because the reality is I've been in Muizenberg for, I'll say 5 years, and some of the homeless people have been here before me. I have no right to come to this community and tell those homeless people that they don't belong here. So what we try to do is some of them, they feel like they're part of this community, and that's the reality that we live with. But what we try to do is, hey, you have to learn to be a good neighbor. You can't just come here and do whatever you want and make this place dirty. So there's a sense of responsibility that we try to teach them, and that's why the U10 is here. And I agree with you. I think he left. We are in communication with U10 right now, but where they are and the clients that they are dealing with, because I do agree that where U10 is, when they started, it was okay, but as we're trying to look at the holistic way of doing things, we communicate with them that, you know what, you need to get a better location. Because one of the big problems is that some of the homeless people, they come to the service center, they eat, they have a therapeutic session, and then they sleep on the street and they get traumatized. And some of them will say, Phinius, I'm not going to go to the service center because the gangsters will come and take belongings, or the law enforcement will come and take their belongings, which has happened before. So they will let us stay and protect their stuff. And what is happening on the street is some of the people are forced to be on the street, are kidnapped and trapped to be on the street. Some of the people that you see. So homeless people are victims of violence. And part of our job is how do we get these people help? So some of the people like, you work with gangsters, aren't you scared they're gonna do this? Or some of you will be like, I don't want to be close to this because something may happen to me. They're like, you know is that nobody that you see on the side of the road wants to be there. If you unfold, you realize there's issues under issues under issues under issues. And that's part of my job, is to investigate the matter and not just assume that that person chooses to be there. Because a lot of them are trapped to be there. And amazing, generous people in this community. And we really appreciate you. One of our biggest issues is that our homeless people are like I love Nelson Mandela, but Nelson Mandela Day is one of the most toxic days of Africa. Because I've seen people giving things to homeless people who don't even know their names, and those homeless people take those things and they go and sell them, and then they go and buy drugs. So there's a lot of irresponsible giving in Muizenberg that keeps homeless people on the street. A handout gives dignity. A handout creates codependency. And some of our homeless people are on the street because we are very generous. Not in a way that is very helpful. Because that's why Yorton came up with a system where they say, rather than giving a homeless person money, please buy the vouchers and give them the voucher. That's what we do with YWAM. Every year they have more than 200 young people coming into Muizenberg to do studies. And all we tell them all the time is, never give a homeless person money. Even a child, I don't care if they're hungry. Give them the Yorton voucher, or give them the coin from the community kitchen, or refer them to self-launch so that they can get help and interact with the social worker. So please, if you know anybody who's giving things to homeless people in their times of need, I need you to refer them to me. And then we'll have a nice coffee, and then they will pay for it after that. Car guarding and for money, the more they're gonna stay on the street. So most of our friends on the mountain, they're car guards. They look after people's cars. Some of our friends under the bridge, they look after people's cars. Some of them don't even go to U-turn because I'd rather go and car guard, make a lot of money, and go and buy a burger than to go and eat some soup at U-turn. You know, so what we're trying to do is trying to manage attention as well, which is very difficult. So if anybody in here has advices on how we can deal with car guarding in Muizenberg, I would really appreciate it. I know this gentleman, Michael, has come up with some good ideas before, but they need to be refined. And if you can assist with that, it will be brilliant. I spoke about accommodation. People go to the U-turn service center, they eat, they have a therapeutic session, but they sleep on the street. That is not holistic, that is not helping us. That's why the idea of the safe space was there to accommodate, rehabilitate, develop, get people off the street. But the approach of the city was a little bit, we had to fight a little bit about that. Some of you felt like we're not listening to you, but we had to listen to you, and thank you for protesting to make sure that we listen to you. The last thing that I just want to share, one of our big issues is that this one is the reality that we live with. Stakeholders are not working together. We are not working together with the city very well. We are not working together very well with social development. We're not working together very well with the SAPs, with law enforcement, with our security companies. And I think it's a trust issue. It's a trust issue that we're dealing with. So we're trying to build relationship with all these people. Because if we do everything in isolated, we're really not gonna deal with crime holistically in Muizenberg. So that's one of our big issues in Muizenberg. And the last one I will say is people with mental health problems. If you're older, you are disabled, you have a mental health problem, it is very difficult to help you in Muizenberg. Because a lot of those people, our job, me and Anna, is to refer people to places where they can get help. But it's unfortunate that we don't have those places where we can refer those people for help. So we encourage people to get off the street. If they refuse, law enforcement takes their place. But you need to understand that we don't force people. From a social development side, our job is not to get rich, it is to help. As holistic as possible in partnership with our stakeholders. And there's been a lot of groundwork. I appreciate your question, Claudia, about maybe Jesse leading the process, Claudia, about maybe Jesse leading the process of coming up with a plan to solve homelessness in Muizenberg. I think the reason is we've been more on the ground than being in an office coming up with a plan. And I own that up. And me and Jesse have communicated about it. And we need to sit down together, maybe with someone, and come up with a holistic plan. But that holistic plan is consultations from the community members in terms of the chemistry, because remember, this is very new in Muizenberg. Social development and safety and security working together, you need a level of chemistry there to make sure that we help our communities holistically. Because I'm not only concerned about my safety as somebody who lives in a house. Muizenberg, somebody asked me if I live in Muizenberg or not. But I'm also concerned about the safety of our homeless neighbors. Just to close, okay, so last thing, this is a request. On Tuesday at 6, if you would like to know your homeless community members who are not criminals and get to know them and help us come up with a solution for homelessness in Muizenberg, because it is not to, it is not for, it is with. They cannot do it by themselves. They need all of us to help them deal with the issues that they're dealing with. So I would like to invite you to join us on Tuesdays. And if you have any security concern, don't worry. I'm on security. Big Magnus on security, and it's tight. So thank you very much. Any questions? Sorry?
Where do we come?
Ubuntu, the old Jewish hall that YWAM has taken over. So YWAM now owns the building, but it's the old Jewish hall. That's where we have the meals every Tuesday at 6.
It's the old Jewish little synagogue.
The big one. Yes.
We'll make sure it goes out in the next newsletter.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm aware of time. There's one question I see from Claudia, and then we'll move on to the next point on the agenda.
Thank you, Phinius, also for a very informative presentation. My question is similar to my question to Jesse. Just looking at what was budgeted for social development compared to what was spent, there was an underspend, but you didn't talk at all about the SLA and the service providers. I think if you can just give us a sense of what the protocols are, what the service level agreement is, what the KPIs are. We've only got a budget for a proposed budget for this year of 115,000 rand. You talk about unbelievably complex issues. You're absolutely right that there needs to be holistic solutions. What are you hoping to achieve with 115,000 rand? What kind of service provision are you expecting from that? And what kind of KPIs, key performance indicators, are in place? If you can talk to that too. Thank you.
Can I take that one? I'm going to need to kick it to touch. Those are excellent questions, Claudia, and it's not for lack of wanting to give answers. What I can say, and I'm quite happy to say here, is that the current board has adopted, obviously, decisions made by the previous board. One of those was a sort of unwarranted a donation monthly to U-Turn without any associated SLA, right? Which at the time may have been seen as expedient, but I think in hindsight it wasn't good practice. We also currently in a budget cycle that we didn't come up with as the current board. So the current budget that we're in, and I'll bring up the timeline shortly. I'll see if I can get it here. Give me a second. The current budget cycle wasn't one that we've come up with, which I know may sound like an excuse. We are working to work within the constraints the city gives us, and there is an allowance for a budget amendment. But yes, all extremely valid points in terms of KPIs, measurable outcomes, and part of what we're pushing back to the city on in terms of the safe space question is we don't want them to assume that Muizenberg is the place for a safe space in the south just because the board initiated a conversation there. We would like to see them actually pull up data about where homeless people are and where the optimal location is. I don't want it to stay in Muizenberg unnecessarily. I know that's not going to be 100% satisfactory, but we'll note it for the sake of the minutes, the question around good governance of SLAs, contracting, and measurability of social development and possibly underspending. Trader, last question, and then we must move on.
Thanks. I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the thinking that's been going on, and I think things are going better in Muizenberg. We've been here for more than 20 years, and it's probably one of the best AGM, well, certainly the best AGM, but besides that, the thinking and planning that goes beyond it. My question is, I think one of the things that has come up is how does one establish trust, and how does one get people to work together? And so maybe just a proposal from what we've tried to do in Muizenberg in the past, but I think the directors and the plans are here are good, but is there a way that we as community can help more to establish a collaborative, a kind of a broad-based committee or team that supports you? And but that would then have to include, and we will have to insist that law enforcement and SAPs and stakeholders and the neighbourhood watch and bodies corporate and so on, that one gets a committee, and if you want to, one could facilitate that it's not just a grab session or talk, but that one does planning with plans to which people are committed. So I just wanted to propose if that might be something that could be useful.
Cool. Thanks, Trader. I think that's a very good proposal, and thank you, Claudia, for your support. Naturally, it would be a very difficult session to manage, right? Because tensions are high, there's emotions, there's various things. But I think it's necessary, and I think maybe we've gotten to a good space now in terms of the dynamic of the mid-board and membership that will allow for that sort of constructive engagement. We will, for the sake of the minutes, we'll note that as a proposal, and I think there's full agreement to kick off that, call it a task team or working group. Okay. That is the end of feedback on operations. We move to point 8 on the agenda, which is the noting of financial statements. Before I do that, leading into this section of agenda points, there's a timeline, because it's the only way that I can figure out what the heck we were going to be talking about. There's all sorts of time dynamics when it comes to the mid. The first thing to note is that we run according to a 5-year business plan, right? That is what the SRA bylaw dictates. The current board's tenure is shown here. So the red line is today. So we're towards the end of 2023. The current board's tenure is for that short period. And yes, this goes back a whole another 20 years to the left, right? Point 8 on the agenda, we will be noting the audited financials that have already been signed off by myself and Karen, despite the fact that we weren't there for the majority of that time, right? So just appreciate that dynamic, but we've reviewed them and we are happy with them. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about surpluses. Let me finish this point, Claudia, and then I'll get to you if that's all right. The next thing we'll look at is the current financial year. So, and this runs from 1 July to end of June. So it's in lockstep with the city's financial year, which is it's not a calendar year. So we'll look at surpluses that we intend, the current board intends to spend in the way of projects. And then one of the major proposals we're making is an amendment to the business plan, which would be effective from 2020. 2024. Yeah, from middle of next year to the end of 2025. So that's just things to keep in mind. I will circulate that. I found it helpful when I was trying to figure out what I was signing off and what we were putting forward, because effectively we're meeting today, but we're already in the financial year that we're already stuck to the budget that was set up at the previous AGM. That's the point. Okay, any broad questions on that before I get on to point 8, which is the noting of the audited financials? Can we let's give Claudia a microphone, please? Claudia, you must come sit at the front next time.
A technical question. Amendment to the business plan, is that reflected in the 2024-25 proposed budget? Is that what this information is?
So we're not on that point yet, Claudia. It will be, but let's just note the financials. It's a minor thing, and then we'll get on, because the business plan comes with a bit of an explanation. So the financials that ran 22 to 23 were published on the website. They're there for noting. The surplus that was utilized, that we'd like to be transparent with the members on, because this wasn't something that was budgeted originally, was about 250,000 Rand spent on a camera backup system on the various point solutions. And there's probably still a bit of work to do on that. There was a new computer for Mike, and then we do, like, because there's a big spike in terms of cleaning demands during the festive season, we spend money on that. So that's where the surplus was utilized. And the point here isn't, unless there's like severe grave concerns with this, they're effective for noting. Okay, so we'll note those financials. Everyone happy?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay, then we get to your point, Claudia. So this has been published on the website. It's an amended business plan, right? And the business plan is comprised of a couple of things. There's a motivation report, which is the story of what we're planning to do. There's an implementation plan, which is a number of line items saying these are the specific things we will do. And there's an associated budget with that. The main thing that you would have seen in terms of the implementation plan difference is that there's a new section on partnerships. Now, in order for us to avail of the opportunity that we have in terms of the bowling green, our SID manager requested that we be clear with the members in terms of our intention to enter into a memorandum of agreement, or actually a management agreement with the city for the use of the bowling green. So that's one of the primary things that we've added in there. He said he's happy with the way I've written it. And that will allow us to then contract with the city and then subcontract and get income in from those bowling greens. It's an extensive document, so kind of quick show of hands, who just read through the document on the website? Just so I know when people are asking questions. No, this was published. There has been a slightly updated one published, but with no material difference.
Sorry.
A question here.
The bowling green, what would you be able to then generate income from it?
Correct.
So have you thought of like getting African Paddle or one of these paddle companies to rent out? They pay like premium for that now.
Yeah, I probably need to bring you up to speed on that project, because we put out a request for proposal and we received the number, which has gotten us to this point.
Okay.
So we've actually got, I think, 5 paddle providers in the pipeline ready to pay up to 40 grand a month for the space.
I've just noticed they're doing it in Claremont at their old bowling green.
Cool. Any other questions? I just want to check. So there's the highlights I'm just calling out. I expect that if you've got a question, I hope that you've read the stuff. It's the refined implementation plan. It's the primary part being the partnerships. You also note a clear delineation of roles. One of the things I laughed about when I saw was management of the SID would be the responsibility of the chair. And I thought, no, that's not what I'm going to be doing. It's the manager that will manage, right? So it's just a little bit of what I was speaking about before in terms of the difference between the board and management was sort of coming through in that. So we've cleaned that up. We've aimed to make it more professional. The law enforcement officer, which Jesse mentioned, we're running that as a project to trial. If it's successful and if we see a positive impact, then we will update future budgets to make that an operational expense. The control room establishment, which I've actually got on the next slide, but effectively some capital spending on kitting out a public safety control room. And then this fifth one actually has only recently been discussed, but it is in the documents on the website, which is contract project manager. So I'm tired of working so hard, to be honest. And so what I've said is that we just pay someone to do the stuff that needs to be done. So complete review of contracts, cleanup of admin, making sure that all our HR policies are in place, make sure that there's, you know, all the standard employment things that need to be done are done. So we've written up a spec for that. It will be circulated and we will ask for people to apply. So that's some of the stuff that is in the amended business plan. All right. One or two questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'm very happy for it to be accepted, and then we'll move on to the next item. Okay, Trader and then Claudia.
Yeah, I thought it was accepted, but I was ready to accept.
Okay, we will have one person. Okay, well, let Claudia have her question, and then we'll put it to the members for a vote.
Are we still on noting of additional surplus funds, or are we on approval of the budget?
I'm so sorry, Claudia. I've tweaked the agenda order very slightly. So that's my mistake. I thought it was more important to speak first of the business plan, and then we can look at the budget that follows from that. Okay, so we're talking about what you would have here as point 10 on your agenda.
Okay, so that's my confusion. So are those items then listed? Should I be able to read that information in the proposed budget? Because I'm not seeing that information in the proposed budget.
Now you're making me think. The projects, in fact, everything shown here is, we'll see on the next point, which is actually the 22-23 projects, which is likely to then run into 24-25. So there's the stuff that's in the business plan actually doesn't have an operational cost impact, because, for example, the law enforcement officer is being run as a trial project, and that is noted as a surplus, which you should see, and the rest of the things there are likely to be done before or will bleed into that year.
I don't want to take up too much time. To me, it doesn't make sense. So I'm prepared to let it go. It makes sense. I just have a particular question about the budget. You mentioned that the monthly donation to the service provider, to U-turn, but I'm not seeing that reflected in the budget. I'm seeing a donation of 7,000 Rand in the budget.
Now I just remember, I don't have it handy, but I think what we've spoken about and agreed, I mean, U-turn itself, one of the things that you will actually see in the implementation plan under the comments is that we're committed to finding a new location for U-turn, right? And we've also discussed reducing that donation amount now that they're kind of on their own feet, it would appear. So we want to reduce the spend on that, and I think the balance will go towards continued social development.
My question is, sorry, I'm looking at the next expenditure, and in that amount, in donations is 7,000 rand. In social uplift.
Donations. Okay, no. So donations, that's it's a discretionary. It would be, as a need arises for some other NGO. So the U-turn one would probably be seen under social development. Sorry for that. Okay, so on the point of the approval of the implementation plan for the amended implementation plan for the last of the 5-year period, which is 24-25. And sorry, that's also a typo there because it says 205. Is everyone happy to accept that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so there's a clear majority. All right, the next item, and now you must work with me here because we're going back. This is the current year. When these are the surplus funds, okay, that the current board has approved, and we feel it's prudent to bring it to the members to put before you. And following this, we will then submit an adjustment budget to the city so that our capital expenditure is made clear. I'm going to run through it quickly, and it's actually quite a lot of money. Part of what I keep in mind was that when I joined, we were on the hook supposedly for like 2 million rand on a safe space, and it feels like some of this may be better spent. Although I think I'm supposed to be impartial as the chair, so let me just speak. So we've got the cameras, which we see a further opportunity to expand that and improve that network. There's the computer equipment for control room. There'll be furniture. There'll be fits out of the office that Mike and Jackie currently use, and further computer equipment for that office. So that's capex, right? So that's things that would, in theory, become assets. And then in terms of surplus projects which are funded from surplus, I've mentioned the project manager. We estimate for about 6 months. The law enforcement officer is only it's half of the year because she may be starting in Jan and it would run until the end of June. Staff training, which is, I don't think we've ever spent a rand on staff training in the history of the Mid, which I think is a bit abysmal. There's a greening project, which we would like to see a number of neighborhood gardens improved. Potentially a skateboarding area, which is still subject to a lot of public participation. And then an urban planning consultant, which we're utilizing at an extremely reduced rate to assist with our spatial planning project. Mike Romain, who's unfortunately not here, he's in America, but he's very keen to see the Surface Circle finish, as well as various small pieces of urban art. Software migration to 365 I've spoken about, and then a new website, which actually loads on mobile. So that sums up. I think we might have a tough time spending it, but that sums up the projects that we intend to see through between now and the end of June next year. Question or point of clarity, Jesse?
And
just project your voice, please.
Okay. And the website upgrade, are we expecting like the site to be upgraded in stages? But really, I'm asking, did we get a members portal?
Is will we get a members portal website? Not for the 12 grand, but I guess it's possible in future iterations. Yeah, but I guess it's possible in future iterations. Yeah, there's actually a first version of the mock-ups for this website available if anyone's interested and inclined towards web design. I know Steph and Louise and Karina, who's not here, have all offered to assist in the design of the website. But just in aggregate, that's probably one of the smaller of the fees. So maybe if there are questions or concerns in terms of some of the bigger amounts, I feel it is right that we are transparent with you as members in terms of the intentions. My feeling is that the project manager is the sort of the unlocking piece, because that's the person that would have a full-time commitment to working on business, i.e. remediating a number of old and outdated things, ensuring the camera network is further expanded and improved in terms of backup time. We're lucky at the moment because Eskom's not playing up. All right, I've got a question from Agnes, and then a lady a little bit further back.
A quick one. In terms of the surface circle and urban art, will that include doing something for the village as well, directing people to the village?
It could. So it's not a no. It's just it's a blank canvas. Excuse me.
It feels like a lot of money when there's so much happening in the beachfront already, and the village. I think a lot of the small businesses there are struggling. So maybe some more directional signage and stuff like that could help them.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yes. Where are you thinking of putting the skateboarding area?
Not. If I tell you guys, you will have a head start on stopping me. No, I'm kidding. Do you know where the sunken garden is? So just next to the putt-putt.
Isn't council at a whole plan of refurbishing? Why are we also supplementing their plan?
It's not part of their plan.
Yeah, we're in discussions with Greg Willifser from Coastal Management. Yeah, basically they don't have plans specifically for that, and so the thinking here is some sort of like seed project, which allows us to trial the concept and see how much activity we can bring into that area, which we think will be good for businesses, and also give parents stuff to do with their kids when it's blowing on shore and there's no surf, but also just like an alternate activity for that space, which is maybe not as activated as it could be.
Can't talk through that thing. I think I've talked loud enough. I don't think that I'm a little bit hesitant about the urban planning consultant. I think council should pay for that. And that money should rather be added onto a greening project so that we can see and live in a beautified Muizenberg. That's what we need, so that we can remove the shabbiness still of our little seaside.
So if I told you what we should be paying for the gentleman who's like an old savant that we got, it would be much, much, much more than that. What we're hoping to do with this money is just to catalyze the process with council to basically, there's something called a community-driven planning initiative that we want to initiate. And once we get on their radar with that, then their resources will come into play. And
all right, if that is to get an entry into that door, then that is not a lot of money, as you say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question?
Is there any intention for Marine Estate to become part of MID? Because for me, at Alabama Marine Estate, I was bankrupt in this, I'm not really MID. But, Marine Estate is a buffer between the so-called problem area, which is Vrygrond.
It's Chad, right?
Yes, correct.
I'm going to have to stop you. And the reason is that on the agenda, that's an upcoming item. Thank you. Okay. So for the current item, which is noting of surplus, is there another question? No. Okay. So on this item, noting of surplus funds. No. Okay. So on this item, noting of surplus funds to be added to an amendment budget for the current financial year. Is everyone, I put it here as a note, but I'm happy to put it to a vote to see that the members are confident in the plans we put forward. Is everyone happy?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
With a note regarding the village getting some TLC on the urban art. Thank you, Agnes. Okay, this one I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I probably could have ordered these a bit better. So apologies. Yeah, I probably could have ordered these a bit better. So apologies. This is now to the business plan for 24-25. It's been published on the website. The only thing that's surplus. So this is now, imagine post a number of these projects being done, but if they are not done in that year, the surplus will roll over. The specific surplus that we intend to use is the law enforcement officer, which is a continuation of the project, after which we would need to put it into the OPEX, because you can't just run projects indefinitely. But it's been published on the website. To be quite honest, if I'd thought about this sooner, I would have possibly proposed quite a big increase in terms of the rates, which we could still do if absolutely needed. So what I've said here, Karen and I ran a quick sort of desktop calculation to say if we were to capacitate up the way we feel it should be in terms of what we'd be paying for public safety, social development, etc., it would look like a 24% increase in levies. So that's not about increasing of the area. So that's our assessment, and that will give you a clue as to why we get to the proposal later, which is the increase of the area. But this budget pretty much flat. It's like an inflationary increase with this specific surplus item for a law enforcement officer. So are we happy to approve this? One last question. Sorry, not last. You've got endless questions, Claudia.
So you're talking about a law enforcement officer for 350,000 rand a year, but you're talking about an increase of 800,000 rand a year. That's a difference of 450,000 rand, if I'm right.
Sorry, these should almost be two slides. So this asterisk here is just a note, actually. So that's not what we're approving, and I would have put more detail into asking for a 24% increase in your contribution.
24% increase is a substantial increase on top of what we're all paying for rates, electricity, water. This has to be extremely justified. So what you just said is that the 350,000 rand is for a law enforcement officer, which would go a long way to clean up the hood. Everybody recognizes that additional 450,000 rand, I'm presuming, is for social development. There's going to have to be a very gritty plan for why anybody would want to spend 450,000 rand on social development when we're currently spending 115,000 rand. So I think we need to be a little bit more transparent about actually what is thought through and what is planned, because you clearly have a plan there.
With a question here.
I think just a clarifying thing, just I think to emphasize the law enforcement officer, I think we all agree that we need some safety in this place. So first things first, I think what you guys can maybe perhaps elevate on is the law enforcement officer. What does he cover? Where is he going to be patrolling? What is he going to be doing? Because I think that justifies an amount of money that we all need here because of crime in this area that is actually increasing. So, fair enough. I hear you, Claudia. I think your maths 100%, but I just think when it comes to law enforcement officer, we should look at that money a little bit more closer in terms of what we need for this area, specifically in the time that we're living in right now.
So I'm going to draw on the slide, right? And I'll get to your point. Above the red line is what we are voting on. Below the red line slide, right? And I'll get to your point. Above the red line is what we are voting on. Below the red line is just a note. So what we are voting on is the proposed budget, which is largely, it's actually just an inflationary increase on the one that we're currently running on. And in addition to that, the money spent on the law enforcement officer would come from the surplus, which is it's about 2.5 million, I think, at the moment. Okay, so that's the law enforcement, and in terms of what you're getting for that, right, is what Jesse alluded to earlier in terms of they call it a force multiplier, and that they have greater powers of search and arrest as compared with mounted men and neighborhood watch, etc. So it's a recognized mechanism for getting that. But so in terms of how that's getting funded from surplus, i.e., it's not operational, it won't be won't be sustainable to do that year on year on year. So we have to, it either has to fix the problem, or after time we'll need to change the way in which we approach things, which is one of the next agenda items, which is the envisaged extension. A question from Wayne.
Sorry, I just want to make a comment on the law enforcement officer. Just because it's one officer doesn't mean it's not going to draw other aspects. And there's a team of auxiliary officers. Michael and I are both auxiliary officers, so there will be additional, almost like vortex, drawing in other resources because there is an officer. That person is not just going to be alone all the time. There'll be various operations that will be part of it, so it's going to add a lot of value to our neighborhood.
Okay, can we vote on the approval of the budget for 24-25, including the surplus? Please note that this voting is for members.
Please clarify, what you're voting on is only, it's not for 24%.
No, absolutely not. Above the red line. You're voting above the red line.
Yes.
Yes. All in favor?
Yes.
Hey. Okay. Okay. This is the next big item, and I'm going to speed up because I'm probably exhausting you guys. So the proposal is as follows. Some of you may have seen this. I'm going to whiz through the proposal, right? We're currently the yellow. We've looked at and done a sort of cursory financial analysis informed by the city in terms of what the potential income could be if we were to include the areas 1, 2, and 3, right? We have had 145 people respond. The primary reason being wanting to feel safer. The second biggest one, seeing more greening and environmental improvement when you think about sunplay and the beach. And thereafter, ask for cleaning and social development, right? Of the people that are existing members that we asked, that were not a lot. So if you haven't had your say yet, then please do. 80% said yes, they were supportive, and 13% said maybe. And I'm seeing Heather nod, and I'm going to quickly go back. There was a mistake on one of the documents I sent out. If you look at one there, you'll see a line which is the M5. One of the versions of this showed the green going past the M5, and a number of the comments said we think that's a little, maybe a step too far. We like the idea of including marine estates, but they're not sure about going all the way past in one shot. So that's just a clarification. Thank you for your comments. Also included in that questionnaire I sent to previous directors, I thought, well, the members will have a view, but I'm pretty sure some of the 60 people that bang their heads on against the mid for a number of years will also have a view. And there was a resounding support. I've spoken to Stephen Frankel at length. I've shared with him, or that might be a dirty word around here, so I must be careful. But I've spoken to Stephen Frankel to get his views. I've spoken to a number of previous directors, and there was a resounding thing saying, yes, we feel this would make sense. They also said, like, it's not going to be easy. So some of the comments, thanks for a very clear outline of motivation. I think the expansion could only be a win-win. No issue, as I think there are more of us contributing. We can also create a safer area. comment there, which I've spoken to, extending beyond, I think, I'm not sure what PG is, Prince George Drive, the M5 is overly ambitious, so noted. And then a very important point, which I think Claudia also made to me in private, was around the importance of ring fencing the current capital reserves, right? So we've ended up with, say, R1.5 million or something after we've done our fund projects over the next 2 years. And now do we, all these extra areas get that, and then we go spend all of your reserve money on them? The answer, I think, is clearly no. So the idea is that we would somehow find a way of ring fencing that money to ensure that there's an equitable sort of treatment of it. Yeah, some of the comments that have come in, we must listen carefully to people's needs and not underestimate the importance of bringing people on the journey. Actual quotes for projected expenses will be necessary once members agree to move forward. And the extension will be a bumpy road. Strongest selling point will be security. So the last thing just to note, and this again is it's a sort of comparative desktop analysis. I want to draw your attention to this this line here, the overheads, right? So this is the percentage of the income goes towards something which is not a direct portfolio. So that's spent on management, overheads, anything that is not directly attributable to public safety, greening, cleaning, right? And what you see is we currently 33% of the money just goes to overheads. It's not directly attributable to a specific portfolio, although we obviously know that Michael, as an auxiliary law enforcement officer, and his proximity to public safety, you could associate it there, but it reduces to 21%. So there's much less money that's spent on overhead, spent on public safety, cleansing an environment, social development allows us to spend more on that. And then actually a dedicated marketing, which isn't for the mid, it would be for the Muizenberg area. It would be to assisting local businesses with marketing, attracting international and local visitors to the area. So that's the view of the split. Now, what are you voting on when you say yes, right? You're saying yes, we're happy with you to proceed with the formal process of canvassing those areas, getting people's votes, and then producing a detailed, gritty business plan with informed quotes to be presented back to you as the members. It would require 60% opt-in rate from those areas. Yeah. Yeah. So you're not. I would say you're not signing your life away by voting in favor of this. But I would love to hear questions. Trader's got a question.
I think I can speak loudly enough.
Okay.
If there are 3 areas, are the votes going to be counted per area? So it may be that, say, area 2 and area 3 go beyond 60% and area 1 doesn't. So could it be possible that one, or is it all going to be one big lump? That's a consideration both in terms of the budget, but also in terms of the feasibility or the economy of scale that one would get.
Yeah, it is. I'm not actually sure on that, to be honest.
Might be worth exploring.
I think we will. I think UP will advise us accordingly because they do this day in, day out. Yeah, good. I don't know, UP, if you have a comment on that. But we don't, yeah, it's definitely noted as a consideration.
Thanks. Okay, Ian?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold it close.
Okay, I must say, sitting here, I was actually at some stage wondering if I'm at the right AGM. But yes, just looking at the map, I mean, we haven't started the process or anything. But if I look at the map there, it's actually 2 areas for me.
And if you start going through a process like that, then it will be 60% of the majority of the property owners within each area. So you can't go and say 3+1, because if you look at the map there, it looks as though it's two different areas. And you also need to be in a position where you go through the process, and after 9 months you realize that area 1 is actually not interesting. Then you can fall back and at the end only incorporate the other side. But just to clarify also, when you go through an extension process like this, the area must be able to stand on its feet 100% as though it's a user. So the current mid property owners cannot subsidize the new areas in any way. That's written in the Bible.
We have another question just in from Yupi right here.
Hi, I'm just a little bit concerned about the principal statistic that you showed of the 145 respondents saying that they wanted to feel safer. So those people are currently residing in zones 1, 2, and 3, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the question needs to be a little bit more specific, because
sorry, do you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sorry, my name is Philip Munder. I live just opposite the park. I'm Karen May's neighbour.
Okay.
I think the question needs to be more specific, because there's feeling safer in the current area of Mid, on the beachfront, maybe in the village, etc., and then feeling safe outside your own house and on your own street. So my concern is that if people feel by joining the Mid, suddenly the whole of Muizenberg that's going to be incorporated is going to be safer, that I think is a stretch, because we're struggling to make just the current Mid area as safe as most people would like it to be. So I think the question about security needs to be asked maybe again in a slightly more refined way, to be sure that if we do incorporate people, that they're going to get what they pay for. Otherwise, you have a potential collapse of the security situation.
Sounds like you're going to be volunteering to join us. It's a fair question, and I want to just quickly go back to this timeline, right? The thing that I keep in mind as I've been working on some of this analysis with the other directors is that you got to think quite far ahead of the future, right? So if this was effective, we're looking at it probably at least a 12-month process, and Yupi keeps on telling me to temper my expectations, right? So Yupi, I don't know if you can comment, looking at this timeline, what do you think is realistically the soonest that those new areas could come online? And I think this is why we put a lot of effort into that the project planning that we foresee being, in the shorter term, things like the law enforcement officer, etc., to address the immediate need. Somebody said, well, if you want the Mid to expand, don't you think the Mid should be perceived as being a better area? It's a bit of an awkward sale, right? And I can see that perspective. I also see the potential of what can be. And so there is a bit of a trust element here. Yupi, can you comment on timelines?
I think just in general, when you establish a SIP, it will take between 15 months to 2 years just for the establishment. In this case, let's say you start the process, start engaging with those property owners on the other side. And remember, you're not just expanding your boundary. You're also going to go through a process to develop a new business plan for your next 5 years. So you've got a lot on your plate, but let's say everything works out as you plan, then you have to, by next year, at this AGM next year, present a new business plan which will incorporate the new areas and the budget and everything as part of that to get it approved by the members here. And then have all the support from those property owners in those areas so that you can lodge an application with the city by the 31st of January of following year.
Cool. I would like to prioritize members' questions. There's one in the front here, Michael.
Just a question, I can speak loudly. When surveying are those owners told how much more they're going to be paying for rents?
Yes, an indicative guideline was provided. Yeah. And I think we'd also like to, I wouldn't say that's comprehensive, that survey, although I would say it's somewhat representative. We would want to do a further job of surveying people's needs, actually understanding, making sure that the thinking that comes out of Phinius and Jesse's work in terms of public safety and social development is also considered. Kirame?
Simon, what I can't understand, Yuki, is that all of us in Camp Road became mid-members, and that was done in just one meeting at the mid. So that was possible. Why can't we take road for road now?
What year was that?
Oh, gosh, sounds like forever. Peter,
2015.
when was that?
Is there a chance that we could vote on some things in the discussion carry on? Some of us would like to.
You need to go, okay.
Yeah.
There's a request for, do we feel we're ready to vote on this in an informed manner, or is there more comments?
There's one more question.
Okay, Jesse.
Are we voting to look at the extension of all three of those areas, or just, because if you look at that map, there's three parts of that map, right?
Yes.
Obviously, it's like the Carisbrook way from say, towards Bay.
Number 3, yeah.
Number 3. It's really sort of low-hanging fruits. It's a very easy area to look at initially, and there's less homes. Are we looking at voting for the extension in general, so all 3 areas, or will we be looking at area by area?
I would propose that we explore it in totality, and based on the feedback we get and the feasibility that UP advises us on, we potentially stage it. But you're voting on exploring the expansion in totality. Okay, can we get a vote on this? All in favor? Okay, so I'd say that's almost unanimous.
Can I just propose an amendment to it, because it says mid-extension approval, it should say mid-extension exploration.
Yeah,
so
that's fine. It will be noted, yeah. So we're approving the exploration of the mid-extension. Yeah. Thank you, Eloy. Okay. A question? So I'll repeat the question for everyone here, although this might be one for a drink. I don't think they're crazy enough for these. They could, and up in Marina de Gama, they're setting up SIDS like with R1 million budget. But I think I would pull my hair out to try to do this with such a little budget. Like in my mind, it's an economies of scale thing. I don't think it should go bigger than that. I think that's a comfortable size, right? Then you like add a Pinelands is like going to be 13 million. You're kind of playing with real money then. That makes sense. Not playing, but you know what I mean. Okay. We've got some other stuff, and I'm aware of time. I'm sorry this is dragged on. It will get better in future years. We move on to point 11, which is point 12, which is the appointment of a registered auditor. Karen, you're going to need to help me on this one. Do we have a proposal for a new one, or are we keeping the existing?
I would like to propose that we change, because we have been at these for a while.
Okay. Would you explain it to the members, please?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the bylaws, we don't change auditors, but we do feel that it is good practice to change every 5 years. So I'd like to propose that we change. We do feel that it is good practice to change every 5 years. So I'd like to propose that we change. We did get comparative quotes. Our current audit fee is around 13,000. The quotes that we did get, unfortunately, were a bit more. We got a quote from Cecil Kilpin, which is close to 20,000. And then the other quote we got was sitting at around 15,000. So
it really is a matter of cost, but I do think that I'd like to propose that we change.
A fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, a fresh set of eyes. We've been with them auditors for over 5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you proposing one of the two of those?
Yeah, well, I think if we can go with the sort of the next quote, which is around 15,000.
Okay, and the name of the auditor?
That is Chas and Co.
Okay. Everyone in favor of changing the appointed auditor to Chas and Co? All in favor? That's not a question, hey, that hand waving. That's let's move on. Okay. Right, next one is confirmation of company secretary. That's currently Cecil Kilpin. We propose that we'll keep Cecil Kilpin as the company secretary. Everyone happy? Yes? Move on. Okay, directors. I was going to give a spiel about what we need from directors, but I'm going to move on. A number of directors are standing down. So Claire Timlin and Mike Ramone come to the end of their 3-year term. We're very grateful for their contributions. Jesse, Karen, and Phinius were all co-opted by the current board, therefore they must stand down. And so the directors that are standing for election, Mike Ramone, who's a property owner, Jesse Adonis, who spoke earlier, and then Karen as the authorized representative for Property Appeal, which is the company which owns a number of commercial properties on the beachfront. Is everyone happy to vote in these 3 directors?
Yes. Yes.
Everyone in favor?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, then this is a special resolution item. A question from Claudia on this previous point. That probably covered in the next point, which is the updated MOI. So the question around co-opting of directors, and I know there have been eyebrows raised before about who ends up becoming a director. The new MOI, I think, puts more stringent requirements in place around who can become a director of the company. So we'll move to that. So this is a special resolution, which means it requires a 75% or greater vote in favor. The MOI is the document which, according to the Companies Act, governs everything we do. It lays out, I guess it is like our 10 commandments of the company. There are a number of amendments. This has all been published on the website, and a number of people have gone through it in detail. The way I see it is that the city sat down with a number of SIDs, of which there are 50, and they workshopped the problems that they found from a governance perspective with the existing MOI. There was some conflicts with the Companies Act. There were 1 or 2 other things which weren't certain. They've had a legal team on it, and they basically said this is the recommended template we suggest going forward, and that this allows us to govern with greater agility. It means we can host virtual meetings and do voting online if we need to, and a number of other things which have been laid out. So, questions on this before we vote for it?
Can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Yes.
What do we talk to that?
Yeah. So this was brought up on the call this morning, although UP subsequently told me there was no chance of it changing. But if we don't adopt this, then I guess we make UP's job harder. So one of the things that was introduced here is this concept of weighted voting. So I think in the very early days of SIDS, the policy was that you'd have 1 vote per property owner. It was then changed to be value rated, which is currently the divisor is 5 million. So you add up all the properties that a single member has, and they get 1 vote for every 5 million or part thereof. So if it's 9 million rands worth of properties, they get 2 votes. If it's 11, they get 3 votes, right? In the updated MOI, that divisor has has been proposed, but this, I'm told that it's a policy at a city level to be 10 million rand as the revised. Now there's pros and cons here because we looked at the analysis of the values of the property. If you set it to something like 2 million, right, then people that are sitting at like 8 million will get 4 votes. But it also means that people that or organizations that have 32 or 40 million rands worth of property end up with 80 votes. So if you set it too low, right, you get a massive skewing of voting on the top end. And yes, if you set it too high, then you have people that are sort of below that feeling like they don't get enough votes. UP has advised me, we had a number of discussions today, that we cannot alter this according to the SRA policy. If we as members of this company do not adopt this, right, which we don't have to, then he needs to go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do with one of the SIDs that doesn't want to adopt the new MOI. Because part of what this MOI does is it brings us in accordance with tax regulation in terms of SARS. It also brings us in alignment with the new SRA bylaw that's recently been promulgated. UP, I don't know if you have any comments on that before we go to Claudia for another question. And for those of you getting itchy feet, this is the last point to vote on. So after this, we're home and away.
Yes. So the process to actually get to this NOI took about 3 years in the making. And it ended up with all the SIDs having the opportunity to provide city with comments on it. And then we had a really big workshop on it, where all the comments was dealt with. And I mean, the most interesting one that actually came, because we provided Simon with just a slideshow to show the biggest changes. And for me, the biggest surprise was the quorum, because the quorum is currently set at 20%. So from the city side, we said, maybe let's make it 15%. Because I mean, I always come to the twice every year instead of once. and then all the SIDs from their side, they outvoted the city and said, no, they wanted the 10%. So I mean, for me personally, 10% is very low, but at the end, that's what's now in your MOI. And then obviously the other big thing is in terms of aligning it with a SARS requirement. So from our side, all SIDs are tax exempt. But every time that SARS approves tax exemption, they put a little rider in, subject to these changes in your MOI. And obviously we've been working with the changes in the bylaw and the policy over the last 5 years. So when SARS come back to say what's happening in terms of the MOIs, we can say no, it's a work in progress, and we can actually prove that we're busy with it. So, but now the bylaw has been promulgated, the policy was adopted, so the only thing outstanding from our side is to get the SIDs to adopt the MOI. So then we can go back to SARS to say, listen, this is the concern you had. All the MOIs currently with all the city improvement districts are in line with your requirements. So no need to reverse any tax exemption status. That was a big thing. And then obviously in terms of the voting, yeah, so the voting thing, the problem was with the voting that we had, especially with the weighted voting, linked to the 5 million party, which you currently still have. And that is in some of the other bigger SIDs where you have one property owner with a lot of sectional title units. And I mean, when I talk about a lot, it's like 170 units. Now you've got one property owner with 170 units with the values from 15,000, 200,000. And he is competing against another property owner like a APSA or a Sanlam that's got, let's say, a R1 billion valuation, but in terms of the MOI, it's capped at 10 votes. And this guy come in with his 170 votes. So no decisions can be made by the SID if they don't have a pre-meeting with this property owner first to get him to agree to any decisions they want to make. And then from developing the bylaw and the policy, the legal advisors actually said, but course the law allows you to weighted vote. Let's be more creative to make sure that we continue that dominance. So that's why that was brought in. But yeah, yes, Gloria. Thanks.
Thanks, you. You two and I had this conversation on the phone earlier, and I actually think what you just described is exactly not the reality in Muizenberg. And I don't mind if this gets passed. This is obviously much bigger than just this sit. But there are practical implications for Muizenberg, and what I would propose is that the MID takes on board the relationship. You've described the relationship between sectional title owners versus massive corporates. You've got, Simon, you can remind us, how many commercial properties in that 1,400 mix? I think they're about 600, which are disproportionately covering the costs of this improvement district. And those votes are now going to be significantly diluted. So I think what you're planning to do is to take this on board. You're going to have to come up with other ways. Instead of going to your sectional title owner who owns 170, actually consulting properly with your commercial property owners to find out, you talk about having a marketing person to promote the marketing needs of the neighborhood. It works for everybody. If Muizenberg works as a commercial area. So I think it's time that we took the commercial property owner seriously and had serious input as to where this MID should be going, whether or not there's voting power.
Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, I think that's a well-made point. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I'm happy for it to please be noted in terms of the taking seriously the needs of commercial property owners. Yes, sir.
It's one. So there are many, many things in this MOA, and one of those happens to be that point around value-related voting. Am I correct?
Yes. Okay, are we happy to vote in favor of the adoption of the new MOI? Yes. Everyone in favor? We've got voting slips if needed.
Sorry, I'm voting against.
You voting against? Okay, so let's do this. Can everyone in favor raise their hand? Okay. And everyone not in favor? Okay, so we need 75%. I must disclose that I've got 11 proxies. I think the fair thing and right thing to do is to do a physical vote with a ballot. So we've got ballot slips. Can I ask that everyone, I don't know if this is allowed, but we can hand out the ballot slips and have everyone please fill in the vote. We won't do the count tonight because we need to do the tally.
Are we adding our proxies as well?
You vote for you and the proxies that you hold, which we have a record of.
Can I explain one implication of this? If the quorum is 10%, currently 240 members, the quorum is going to be 24 members, and you're going to need a simple majority. So you're going to need 13 votes in the future to decide anything for this improvement district.
But actually then puts the onus on us to be active members. So it's not that you're wanting to do, that you're just aiming for that forward. I mean, it then makes the responsibility of us as firm owners in this work to turn up.
Absolutely. And let people know that they have to become members. Because a lot of the players are not even aware that they need to become membership. So in other words, it means going on a recruitment drive for new members. Which is exactly what I think you don't want to do because then you don't want to have a problem with a quorum in the future. And I think it's imperative.
Yeah, I'd say we want as many active members that read what's put out there beforehand as possible. The people that want to contribute at this level. Some people are bored by company governance, right? So that's also something to consider. But I think, so my read on the situation, if everyone's happy, is that we'll go to a written ballot, and the ballot sheets have been or are being circulated. And then the outcome of the vote will be announced within 3 working days. A question from you, Trader.
I think it should be recorded that I feel that the way that this thing has been happened, the way that you've explained it, in fact, small and communities are being bullied by the way that's been designed, maybe looking at SIDS in the big city. And I think we should really just record that that probably the needs of improvement districts, which are mainly residential, are very different from the big city ones, and that it shouldn't be assumed that I think it should still be questioned.
Okay, so that will be noted, and I think Yupi has comment on that.
I think maybe just a comment on that. You must remember that the number of small sets far outweigh the number of big sets. So just to put that in perspective. And in terms of voting, remember at this stage the valuation is capped at 5 million. All we're doing is we're moving it to 10 million, catering for the next 10 years. Because it took us more than 10 years to actually move it from 5 million to 10 million. So your normal houses, in any case at one vote, and it still would be one vote.
Excellent. So guys, so just one person speaking with the mic at a time. So Claudia, if you have a question, please get the mic. Just for the sake of order and people getting tired, it's late, I'm hungry. We're going to finish off the ballots. Please make sure if you're a member or if you're a holder of proxies, your vote is clearly noted on the ballot, along with your whatever identifier is required of you. And please make sure it goes to either Michael, Jackie, or one of the current directors before leaving.
Before I close, I just want to ask the question implications for that,
Yes.
because I don't understand that.
Okay. I will repeat the question, and if we can get the microphone to you, please, to answer the question from the lady in the middle. If we do not adopt this, right, i.e. if we do not vote in favor, are we in some way in trouble with SARS, or do we attract a further administrative burden? Yupi, if you can speak.
So that's the biggest risk, financial risk. That SARS actually come back and revoke your tax exemption status. And they can then backdate that to the date that the tax exemption was granted. Which means that there's 2.5 million that is sitting with years. Is where that goes. So that's the risk. That's the financial risk. And then on the other side, in terms of the survival tax state, that the non-profit companies, MOI, must be in line with the legislation. So what's currently happening is the city adopted a new bylaw, new policy, which means that your MOI is actually now not seen to the general. So all we're doing is we're bringing that back to say now we've got the bylaw in place, we've got the policy in place, MOI is in place, and then next year we'll go through a process to re-sign finance agreements as well. Just to make sure that we cover all the bases and just come back full start. So just explain the form.
Okay, so you can ignore the part which talks about directors. You simply enter your name if you're a member, or if you're a proxy and not a member, then enter your name under proxy, your address, and then your vote in favor or not in favor of adopting the new MOI. Okay, so you can ignore the part which talks about directors.
No, we're not in favor because we can't afford it.
Karen, I hope that's a joke.
Is that the last vote?
This is the last vote.
Can some of us go?
Let's just pass our votes on now.
Yes, okay. We had a very, let's just check. We had a section on thanks. I'll make sure this goes into a newsletter.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Oh, is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
As long as it doesn't get interrupted anymore.
Okay, so, while everyone is handing in their votes, please make sure they get to Karen. A couple of things. To the staff, trying to see where Jackie is. Where's Jackie? Okay, so to Jackie, to Michael, thanks to you guys, because it's not an easy job working in a community-led organization with volunteers, so thank you. And then there are a couple of people that I just wanted to call out by name and face. It is not an exhaustive list, and because their faces are up here, it doesn't mean they're saints, right? It just means thank you for something in particular in terms of the activities of the MID. So JC was just checking that he is a director now. So Agnes assists me on the sly with my newsletters before they go out. I send them to her for proofing. She also has a lot of input in terms of marketing strategy. Louise, still trying to convince her to come on board as a director, but it's also been, I mean, she's been absolutely like a dog with a bone, emailing the mayor about lights that just won't be set back on. And that's the sort of thing which I wish we didn't have to do, but it's awesome when individual community members actually say, you know what, I can do this single thing, and they do it well. So thank you. Claudia, for keeping high standards and asking the hard questions, thank you. Liana is not here tonight, but she's been pivotal in kicking off the Muizenberg Community Watch. And that's her, and along with the rest of the team, some names that you'll notice there. A lot of hard work which goes into that. Wayne, I think he might have left, but I want to make sure that he knows his names. Heidi, Heidi probably deserves a round of applause because she's like the secretary of every single civic body in Muizenberg. Fantastic connector, also helps me proofread things. Michael, I don't know if he's still here, but he's awesome and involved with the Muizenberg kitchen. Claire is not here, but also heavily involved in the kitchen. These were Phinius's nominations. Chad was asking questions about MENW or Marine Estate. And then Rosine and Glenda, who aren't here, but personally have been extremely helpful to me. And these are just people that if you see them, know that they probably know something about the MID, chat with them. You know, this is the fun part, actually, is getting to contribute to the space you live in. And then the last thing before Jesse's question is Shirley McClarty, who Claire has put forward, because she single-handedly looks after the gardens here in Sidmouth Road. And we want more gardens to look like that. We, of course, won't tilt the camera to look the other way in Sidmouth Road. Okay, so guys, I think all the votes in. If you are a proxy or a member, have you completed a voting form and handed it in? Can you hand that to Michael, please? Okay. Yes.
One on the spot mention to Gary Flock for managing all the madness. And
Yes. Thanks, Gary. Okay, guys. I think Q&A will handle over drinks. Thank you, Yuppie. You owe me a drink, by the way. And we can say the meeting is adjourned, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Before I jet out.